Well, very good afternoon to all. Today we will discuss on a topic that is quantitative research. So we will discuss about it. So before we start, we just want to know about the thing is that there are two essential research orientation in our research methodology, and that is quantitative research and another is a qualitative research. Both the research orientations are focusing on some different orientation, different method, different issues and different point, so that we can understand so where through we have got the quantitative element and this type of explanations as well as the qualitative orientations. So when you're talking about the quantitative, you just want to understand that when you're talking about the quantitative denotes the numerical orientations, which is dealing with the numerical data and how to interpret, how to analyze and how to express it. Through that we can get a clear image regarding the numerical data. So when you're talking about the qualitative research focusing on the non-numerical data, which is not a numerical perceptions, such as the values, attitudes, emotional orientations. Those are the qualitative values. So in today's discussions we will focusing on the quantitative aspects of the research, and now step by step we have just follow the preparations. First of all, you can understand that quantitative research deal with objective measurements and include statistical or numerical analysis of the data collected through polls. So you have just to pay attention on 2 or 3 important essentials, such as that objective measurements, those measurements which are focusing on the objective elements of the study. Second, it includes statistical and numerical analysis. That means quantitative research, through the data which we have gathered, we can measure it through statistical analysis, and those data which have gathered through statistics, this data is basically called the numerical analysis. And next one, the variables can be manipulated to examine the cause-effect relationships, carry out comparative analysis or interventional analysis within a specific or specified populations. So we all know that there are 2 essential variables in our research orientation. That is one is independent variables, another is dependent variables. The researcher can manipulate independent variables and they try to figure out the effect within the dependent variables. For examples, income is an independent variables. If we paid attention on the educational qualification, the educational achievement, which is somehow related to the income, if the persons cannot expend too much money into their academic backgrounds, they cannot get the proper degree. So the educational orientation, the degree, the achievement, it's somehow depending on the income orientation. Income is specifically focusing on or derived from the independent variables. In this regard, we need to pay attention that there has a cause-effect relationship. There has a relationship between income and the educational background or educational upliftment. There has a cause and effect. Income is specifically are those causes, specifically those specific causes through which educational upliftment can get into the market, get into the static. So there has a relationship between cause-effect relationship, and the quantitative research focusing on the cause-effect relationship as well as on the independent and dependent variables. Second important issues are that Quantitative research deals with numbers. Quantitative research focusing on the numerical analysis. দেখো যখন আমরা রিসার্চ ওরিয়েন্টেশনে ফোকাস করি তখন অনেক ডেটা আমরা পেয়ে থাকি, যেমন লাইক দ্য ডেটা অফ এজ, ডেটা অফ ইনকাম, দ্য অ্যামাউন্ট অফ, দ্যাট মিনস দিস আর দ্য নিউমেরিক্যাল ডেটা। এই ধরনের নিউমেরিক্যাল ডেটাগুলোকে আমরা কিন্তু সবসময় কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ রিসার্চের মধ্যে দিয়ে ডিল করি when trying to focusing on the quantitative research to deal with this type of numerical data. Third important point, it focuses more on convergent reasoning than on divergent reasoning, which means that the researcher tried to find out solution to a research problem with help of standardized tools and not by creative ideas. In quantitative research or quantitative analysis, we focusing on some specific method through which we deal the entire quantified data. অর্থাৎ এই কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ রিসার্চে যে ধরনের সংখ্যাগত তথ্য আমরা পেয়ে থাকি, নিউমেরিক্যাল যে ডেটা আমরা গ্যাদার করে থাকি, এটাকে আমরা কিভাবে ডিল করি থ্রু কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ মেথড। ফর এক্সাম্পল সার্ভে রিসার্চ, data collection tool like close-ended questions in the questionnaire method. These are the method and tools through which we nurture the quantitative data in our research orientations. Third, it mainly focuses on quantifying relationship between variables. Already we have discussed in the first point that there are two essential variables in our research orientation, that is independent variables and dependent variables. And কি বলছো, the mainly focuses on quantifying relationship between variables. So quantitative research through we can find out the relationship between the variables, how independent variable pay impact, focusing on the dependent variables, how dependent variable influenced by the independent variables. That means there has a relationship between themselves, there has a cause effect relationship, there has a correlational factors are responsible. As a researcher we need to find out the relationship, we need to figure out the issues and facts. So in this regard we need to focusing on the quantitative relationship between the variables, and the rest of the points discuss about the quantitative research is a systematic and empirical approach to investigating phenomena using statistical, mathematical and computational techniques. So quantitative research giving importance on systematic analysis as well as empirical approach, empirical data, the data which we have gathered from the field. These data are not abstract data. The data which we have gathered from the field, these are a quantitative data, numerical data. So আমাদের কি করতে হবে, সেই ধরনের ডেটাকে systematically study করতে হবে, need to focusing on the systematic method to understand it. How dependent variable associated with independent variable, is there any relationship between themselves? If I cut down the independent variable from the research orientation, what will be the effect on the dependent variables? So there has a nurtured orientations. We need to pay focus on the systematic question, systematic study, so that we can get a verified answer from the field. So we can easily say that quantitative research provide us specific authentic data through which we can validate, we can measure it by the use of systematic tools as well as the mathematical tools, and it will provide us a fruitful results. So as compared to the qualitative research, quantitative research always focusing on systematic observations, objectivity, cause effect relationships, independent dependent variables relationships, and there has a quantifying measurement, statistical tools, numerical tools through which we can get more and more authentic analysis and more authentic results. Here are some important characteristics of quantitative research. First of all, the numerical data collections. Quantitative research always focusing on the numerical data. That's why it is called the quantitative, otherwise it can be a qualitative. When you're talking about the values, talking about the emotions, orientations, traditions, that means these are indicating the value, how much I am associated with the religious divinity. It can be measured in a numerical manner. This is solely associated with our value orientations. That's why it's called the numerical data collections. So when you're talking about the numerical data collection, that means we have to pay attention that if I have more than data which is belonging from the numerical sections, then I have to apply quantitative method, because quantitative method through we can get proper systematic results. Second important point is statistical analysis. Quantitative data analysis can be measured through various statistical analyses such as SPSS. We can put the entire data into the SPSS, or we can put the data into the spreadsheet or the Excel sheet, and after that we can measure through the data by the use of some commands. We can get the result of discrete results, discrete statistics. We can get the results of correlation coefficients. We can get the evaluation results of the pivot table sorry, bar diagram, pie chart easily can be measured through statistical analysis. Why it is possible? Just because of that we are using the quantitative data. So in the quantitative research orientation, statistical analysis is one of the essential tools. Third important nations are the objective measurements. Quantitative research orientations focuses on the objective orientations, objectivity. There is no such subjective orientation, subjective feelings are present over there. People are touched, people are associated to each other, people are focusing on the data based on their subjective measurements. These factors are typically associated with this. These are the specific cause of the particular that fact. So there has an objective relationship, objective measurements. So when you focusing on the quantitative research, it is automatically paid attention on objective measurements. Fourth important points, large sample size. Quantitative data analysis through we can get quantitative data, specifically paid attention on a large amount of sampling. It is not focusing on the less amount of sample. A large amount of sample can easily be drawn, can easily be evaluated through quantitative research orientations. Fifth, hypothesis testing. Quantitative measurements and quantitative data analysis, so we can easily prepare authentic or more accurately testable hypothesis, and after preparing the hypothesis, we can test it, and through this we can get the essential knowledge from themselves. So in the field of quantitative analysis, hypothesis testing and result gathering can be easily acceptable, can easily be figured out. Here I have mentioned some essential methods which are specifically found in the quantitative research analysis. These are the surveys and questionnaire, experimental method and observational studies. You all people know about the survey. Survey is a quantitative research orientations, and this method through we can get detailed quantitative data from the field, as well as when you're talking about the questionnaire, somehow survey and questionnaire is related to each other. That's why these two words, two specific tools and method I have paid in here, that is a survey and questionnaire mentioned here through in a specific one point, survey and questionnaire. So questionnaire means we all know that questionnaire is a method of data collections, the tools of data collections. Through the questionnaire tools we have gathered data from various resources, far from the people, the researcher who is staying here, and they can easily get the data through questionnaire from the far peoples who are standing surroundings rigorous areas. There are two types of questions present in the essential questions are present in questionnaire: open-ended questions and closed-ended question. Though there is other type of questions also there, contingency questions are there, matrix questions are there. So basically we need to focusing on the close-ended questionnaire. Close-ended questionnaire are those questionnaire through which researcher provide specific answer options within the specific questions. For example, a researcher asks you the questions, are you love to eat biryani? There's a answer options. First options, yes. Second options, don't know. Third options, no. That means you have to choose the answer from these three options, either from the yes or from the don't know or no. So through this close-ended questions, through gathering data, can be more easily provide you quantitative orientations. You can easily coding their viewpoints, and it will help you to specifically analyze and interpret it. That's why close-ended questionnaire method is more effective in the field of quantitative analysis. Other important method is the experimental method. Your people know that experimental method is a lab-based method. Experiment through we can nurture the issues in a specific setup or specific set of laboratory or specific social setups. That's why I call that experiment. Researcher fine-tune the independent variables and try to figure out the effects in the field of dependent variables. So experimental, such as that we all know in sociological there has a Beeching experiment. There's an experimental method. Another important point is observational studies. Observations. When August Comte first introduced the concept sociology and made it positivist, he paid attention on some specific method. One of them is the observation. So observations means we have observed the fact and their impact, their orientation, their issues, and their different parts, and how the parts are connected to each other, how it is moving towards. Observations provide us the objective reality. Does the object is really present over there? Does the humans really present over there? Observations through we can get the knowledge. Yes, the persons is present over there. Yes, the object is presenting, and is the paperweight is presenting on my table. So there is a observational studies through we can observe the fact and get the proper empirical knowledge. These are the essential methods of quantitative research and orientation, research analysis. Here we will discuss on the strengths of quantitative method. Why we focus on quantitative method? That means there has some positive spirit, there has some advantages, there has some strength. So we need to discuss what are those strengths. It provides an opportunity to collect data from a large sample and helps to conducting broader study as well as generalizations of results to a larger populations. That means provide an opportunity to collect data from a larger sample. When we have the larger samples and most of the samples are numerical oriented, then we need to apply the quantitative method. It will help us to gather maximum output. It will help us to provide the better data orientations, as well as it helps in conducting broader study and generalize the result. Quantitative method through constructions of generalizations provide us authenticity, provide us reliable result, and there has a long-term validity. We all know that in social science research, the research and their findings is not always static. For the long time being, it is always changing. But quantitative method through we can get the more generalized result from the field. Second, it helps the researcher to attain reliable, valid, accurate and objective result. Pay attention on these four essential points: reliable, valid, accurate and objective. Reliability indicating that consistency. That means the result which we have gathered from the data, it will not be destroyed, it will not provide you the abstract result, it will not change suddenly. That means there has a authenticity, there has a consistency. It is called the reliability. Valid indicating that the validation nature in respect of the culture, in respect of the society, in respective of the perceptions, facts, or individuals or groups or communities. So validity indicating that the result which we have published, which we have gathered through data analysis, there has some impact on society. It is present in our society and it is a reliable as well as valid. Accuracy. কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ রিসার্চের একটা বড় দিক হলো অ্যাকিউরেসি. The research is providing the accurate data. That means when it is focusing on the quantitative data, when it applying statistical tools and mathematical and numerical tools, in this regard it is obviously provide us a more accurate and authentic result for the people. And the rest points are objective. It is not focusing on the subjective orientation or subjective element. It is a objective. Objective denotes that there has a specific socially accepted value, socially accepted reliability. It is not changed from subject to subject. It has an authenticity, it has an importance and impact on society. Next point, it provides an opportunity to replicate and design similar studies. It provides an opportunity to replicate and design similar studies. Same kind of study design. দেখো এখানে বলছে it provides a replicate and design similar studies. Replicate মানে you can apply this method in most of the cases, and all the factors, all the cases, it will provide you the same results. That's why I call it the replicated and design similar studies. And that means when you have paid attention on some data which is associated with your research, and these data are numerical, and already some research happened towards these issues, and they or the previous researcher using the same kind of data, and they are focusing on the specific field orientation or objectives. That means you can easily apply this quantitative method so that you can get more reliable results, more authentic result from the field. So there has a balancing orientation, there has a balancing prospect to gather data from the various field of orientations. দেখো এই যে স্পেসিফিক কনসেপচুয়াল ভিউগুলো আমরা বলছি না, রিলায়েবিলিটি, ভ্যালিডিটি, অ্যাকিউরেসি, অবজেক্টিভিটি, এগুলো কিন্তু কোয়ালিটেটিভ রিসার্চের ক্ষেত্রে এত ভালো রেপ্লিকেট হয় না। কোয়ালিটেটিভ রিসার্চ ক্যান বি চেঞ্জ ফ্রিকুয়েন্টলি, because qualitative research is paid attention on the values, on the traditions, human orientations, এগুলো বেশি প্রায়োরিটাইজ পেয়েছে। তাহলে কোয়ালিটেটিভ রিসার্চ যেখানে ভ্যালু, ট্র্যাডিশনস, ইমোশনস এগুলোকে ইম্পর্টেন্স দিচ্ছে, সেখানে on the other side quantitative research focusing on the quantitative analysis, statistical tools, closed-ended questionnaire method, survey research orientations. These are those essential methods through which we can get data from the field of orientations. তারপর it provides an opportunity to conduct experiment under controlled environment and thus minimize error variance. Opportunity to conduct experiment under controlled environment. Somehow we can say that quantitative method focusing on that experimentations, experimented ideology they are focusing on. If some specific factors, some specific issues regarding gender or any economic or other perceptions in the field of laboratory, in the sections of closed parameters, you can easily observe their activities. That means within the control environment, observing the activities changes can be possible in quantitative research. Quantitative research provide us these options and opportunities so that we can quantify the result, so that we can understand that which statistical method will be applicable towards this. And the rest 5.1, it use close-ended and structured questions which provide responses free from personal biases. Close-ended and structured questions, I have already told about regarding the closed-ended questionnaires. Closed-ended questions, all the questions are close-ended. Most of the cases researcher had provided that specific objective, specific options of answer, so that interviewee can collect their answers, their answers from the options which I have already provided earlier. In the close-ended sections, that it means it is a structure. Every questionnaire there has some specific structural output, and it is following some specific rules to prepare the questionnaire. And when you're talking about the quantitative method, in the quantitative research orientation, most of the questions are in the questionnaire that is are a close-ended questions. Through we have got more accurate data, so researchers bias cannot be possible to find out in this quantitative method. There's a minimalistic bias we can find out, because the data gathering and interpretations and orientation is not solely depending on the researcher's orientation or researcher sites. On the other hand, the method of questionnaire is not going through a face-to-face interactions. A researcher can directly communicate with themselves through face-to-face by the use of questionnaire method. আমরা জানি যে questionnaire method কে আমরা কি করি, আমরা পৌঁছে দিই বা প্রেরণ করে দিই বাই পোস্ট বা থ্রু এখন ইলেকট্রনিক মেলের মাধ্যমে আমরা questionnaire কে পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছি। তাহলে যে রেসপন্ডেন্টের কাছে আমরা কোশ্চেনিয়ারটা পাঠালাম, he or she fill the questionnaire and send back to the researcher. তাহলে এইভাবে কোশ্চেনিয়ারটা ফিল আপ করে সে আবার রিসার্চারকে কোশ্চেনিয়ারটা পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছে। Researcher collect the questionnaire from the respondents and they have tried to decoding the questions and find out the results by the use of data analysis. And also researcher using the statistical methods to prepare accurate results. Here are some important limitations of questionnaire method. দেখো questionnaire method এর যেমন কিছু পজিটিভ সাইডও আছে, স্ট্রেংথও আছে বা তোমার অ্যাডভান্টেজ আছে, তেমনই কিন্তু এই মেথডটার কিছু ডিসঅ্যাডভান্টেজও আছে। কি ডিসঅ্যাডভান্টেজ আমরা পাবো কোশ্চেনিয়ার মেথডের ক্ষেত্রে, সেটা হচ্ছে কি, ফার্স্ট ওয়ান, দ্যাট ইট ল্যাকস কনটেক্সচুয়াল ডিটেইলস। Contextual details and how different socio-cultural situations, cultural upliftment, personal viewpoints, personal experiences, group experiences, the people of community, how accepting themselves, this type of conceptual details cannot be gathered through the method of quantitative orientations. Every context speaks some different images. If you are present in the college, the orientation is different. If you are present in the supermarket or shopping mall, the orientation is still different. And when you are associated with your friends or colleagues and hobnobbing to each other, the contexts are different. So without the understanding of the specific context, it would be very difficult to figure out the research questions, to figure out the proper essence of the facts. That's why it calls that it lacks contextual details. তোমরা যদি জিমেলের থিওরি পড়ো, জিমেলে দেখবে বলছে জিমেল ফর্ম আর কন্টেন্টে কথা বলছে, ফর্ম, তাহলে স্পেসিফিক কন্টেন্ট ইজ ডিপেন্ডিং অন স্পেসিফিক কনটেক্সচুয়াল অ্যানালিসিস। আমাদেরকে কোনো ঘটনাকে বুঝতে হলে কনটেক্সটটা বুঝতে হবে। কলকাতায় আজ যে সিচুয়েশনটা চলছে, কলকাতায় আজ যে এত মিছিল, এত সমস্যা, এত পরিস্থিতি এই জায়গায় পৌঁছেছে, তাহলে এটা এমনি হয়নি। দ্যাট ইজ নট আ ইজি টাস্ক টু পিপল ডুইং দিস। মানুষের ভালো লাগছে বলে রাস্তায় বেরিয়েছে, নট লাইক দ্যাট। দ্যাট হ্যাজ এ স্পেসিফিক কনটেক্সট। So we need to understand the context so that we can understand that why the people are choosing these methods to get the justice. জাস্টিস পাওয়ার জন্য এই মেথডগুলো বিভিন্ন মেথড তারা কেন গ্রহণ করেছে, কনটেক্সটটা বুঝতে হবে যে কিরকম একটা কনটেক্সটে ঘটনাটা ঘটছে। তাহলে এত ডিটেল কনটেক্সচুয়াল অ্যানালিসিস যেটা কোয়ালিটেটিভ রিসার্চের মধ্যে খুঁজে পাওয়া সম্ভব, ইট ইজ ভেরি হার্ড টু ফাইন্ড আউট in the quantitative method or quantitative analysis. Second, the research is limited to statistical approach and so lacks the grounds for the process of discovery. That means to say the research is limited to statistical approach. We have already told that in quantitative research we are using statistical tools to measure more authentic and quantifying data. It is a very positive side of a quantitative research through which we can get more accurate results. On the other side of a coin, we can say that quantitative research is more prone to focusing on statistical approach. All the variables of our society, all the variables of human emotions, human orientations cannot be measured through statistical orientations. Emotions can be measured through statistical orientations. How people solely devoted towards her gods, towards his or her almighty, we cannot measure it through statistical orientations. How parents love to their children, we cannot measure it through statistical applications. And lack the grounds for the process of discovery. Quantitative research are more systematic. It is not just focusing on the explorations of the facts, explorations of the content, explorations of the evolving nature, evolving emotions. So it is more prone to structural element, how structurally method connected to each other, how structurally variables are connected to each other, what is the relationship between the cause and an effect. There is a more structured orientation, structured viewpoints. Third point indicating close-ended or structured questions might reflect a limited and incomplete informations. Structured questionnaire and close-ended questions not just provide us a detailed, in-depth data or informations. In quantitative research or quantitative method, structured questions are more structured and focusing on the specific already implemented, already provided answers. A researcher have to collect, and that means the interviewee have to collect the answers from the given options. They cannot measure, they cannot put their own viewpoints. Researcher does not involve interview or in-depth perceptions of individuals, so it does not provide complete insight of the real world. Why the peoples of Kolkata and the rest of the Bengal are always focusing on the justice of the Arjikor issues? There has an emotional orientations. If you want to get this emotional orientation, we need to focusing on the interview method or in-depth perceptions. Through quantitative or closed and structured through, we cannot measure their emotions, their views, their aggressiveness. Result might provide much narrower and sometimes superficial data sets. Result might provide much narrower and sometimes superficial data set means it is more focusing on data, it is more data driven, it is more statistics oriented. That's why its results are more narrower. The research might not yield natural or original responses of individuals. That means you have asked me uh, which foods are loved to eat. There are 4 to 5 options you have mentioned, but I have noticed that which I really love to eat the food, the name of the food is not present into their options. But I cannot put the options, I cannot express my feelings because there has no such options. এই রকম সিচুয়েশনগুলো কিন্তু কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ মেথডের লিমিটেশনসগুলোকে তুলে ধরে। একটা ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল যে ইমোশনাল ওরিয়েন্টেশন থেকে ভাবে দ্য রিয়েল ওয়ার্ল্ডকে কিন্তু কখনোই বোঝা যায় না কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ মেথডে। ইট would be more to understand if we paid attention on the hermeneutics method. Hermeneutics method through we can get more informations from the individuals. Here are some important types of quantitative research: experimental research, correlational research, descriptive research, causal comparative research or ex post facto research, longitudinal research, and the cross-sectional research. Experimental research, correlational research, descriptive research, all are paid focusing on the scientific orientations, objectivity, statistical tools or statistical measurements, and numerical data, as well as the cause-effect relationship between the variables, independent variables and the dependent variables. Longitudinal research also focusing on the observing the same kind of data through a different time frame. In medical science research, they are always focusing on a longitudinal research to testing a specific medicines or any kind of changes they have measured through longitudinal study. একটা ধরো গিনিপিগকে কোনোটা ওষুধ বা কোনোটা ধরো কেমিক্যাল তার উপর টেস্ট করা হয়েছে, তাকে অবজার্ভ করা হয় 7 দিন 10 দিন 15 দিন 20 দিন 1 মাস 2 মাস। এইভাবেই তো ধরো টিকাগুলো ইনভেনশন হয়, এইভাবেই তো ধরো তোমার ওষুধগুলোর ইনভেনশন হয়, তার সাইড এফেক্টটাকে দেখা হয়। লংজিটিউডিনাল স্টাডিতে একই ভেরিয়েবল সেম ভেরিয়েবলসের ওপরে কি করা হয়, সেম ভেরিয়েবলস উপরে টেস্ট করে তার মধ্যেকার চেঞ্জগুলোকে রেকটিফাই করা হয়। ক্রস সেকশনাল রিসার্চ ডিফারেন্ট। ক্রস সেকশনাল রিসার্চ হচ্ছে এখানে দেখা হয়ে থাকে ডিফারেন্ট ভেরিয়েবলসগুলোকে আইডেন্টিফাই করা হয় অ্যাজ সিঙ্গেল পয়েন্ট অফ টাইম। অর্থাৎ ধরো একটা ওষুধকে টেস্ট করার জন্য ধরো একটা সুপার পাওয়ার ওষুধ, ঠিক আছে, এনার্জি বুস্টার ওষুধকে টেস্ট করবো, একই সাথে একটা ধরো তোমার গিনিপিগ, একটা ধরো তোমার বিড়াল, একটা কুকুর, এদের উপর 3টের উপর টেস্ট করেছি। সার্টেন টাইমে দেখার চেষ্টা করা হয় যে কার উপরে এফেক্টটা বেশি এবং কার উপরে এটা এসেনশিয়াল রোল প্লে করছে এবং কোনটার ক্ষেত্রে জাস্টিফাইবল হবে। So cross-sectional research are the another important factors. Here are the important essential steps of quantitative research. When you execute the quantitative research, you need to focusing on this specific orientations, formulations of hypothesis. Before conducting the research, conducting the survey, you have to formulate the hypothesis. তোমাদেরকে হাইপোথিসিসটাকে ফর্মুলেট করতে হবে, তৈরি করতে হবে। অর্থাৎ কি বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা রিসার্চ করছি, which is the method, which is the research topic, which is the proper research questions. We need to formulate the hypothesis, and always when you formulating the hypothesis, it is focusing on the tentative data and more orientations of review of literature. Second, define variables, independent variables and the dependent variables. I have mentioned the short form IV and DV. IV denotes independent variables and DV denotes dependent variables. Define the variables. You need to figure out which variables or variable is independent and which variables are dependent. That means there has a cause effect relationship present. If they are not connected to each other, there can be find out any kind of cause effect relationships. But if they are connected to each other, there can be find out a cause and effect relationship. This is called defining the variables. Rest on design the experiment. You need to figure out and need to design the proper experiment techniques, how you measure, how you execute, how you deal the situations. Next, select and assign participants. কার উপরে তুমি সার্ভেটা করবে, কোন কোন ভেরিয়েবলস গুলোর উপরে তুমি ফিগার আউট করে বিষয়টা দেখো। সিলেক্ট অ্যান্ড অ্যাসাইন পার্টিসিপেন্টস, কন্ট্রোল ফর এক্সট্রেনিয়াস ভেরিয়েবলস। কন্ট্রোল ফর এক্সট্রেনিয়াস ভেরিয়েবলস মানে এখানে বলা হচ্ছে যে টু ম্যানিপুলেট দ্যাট ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ভেরিয়েবল সো দ্যাট ইউ ক্যান আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড দ্য ইম্প্যাক্ট অর এফেক্ট অন ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ভেরিয়েবলস। Collect data. Through this entire process, the researcher try to collect data from the different sources, different orientations. Why he collected data? Because for the analyzing the results. Data collections, after the data collections, you paid attention on the analyzing the results, and rest and most essential is the draw conclusions. After analyzing the data, you have find out the true essence of the hypothesis, true essence of the conclusion, true essence of the result. Now here I have mentioned the first important types, that's the experimental research. Experimental research, within the experimental research I'm focusing on some specific characteristics. What are the characteristics of experimental research? First, it involves a systematic procedures including definitions of the problem, research design, data collections and interpretations. So it is focusing on the problems as well as the proper designing of the research. Which method will be applicable to dealing such problems which you have failed that it is a genuine problem, and through experiment we can get the result which I have somehow mentioned, somehow measured through hypothesis and interpretations. After designing the research, researcher want to collect data, then they have analyzed the data and to figure out the results. Next is there is a manipulations of one or more dependent variables to study its effects on dependent variables. Experimental research provides stimuli to independent variable and to figure out or to find out the impact on the dependent variables. So it is focusing on, that means in experimental research, researcher focusing on the variables, independent variables, and try to figure out these results in the field of dependent variables. That's why called the experiment. এই যে একটু আগে বলছিলাম একটা ওষুধ টেস্ট করার জন্য গিনিপিকের উপরে ধর একটা ওষুধ দেওয়া হয়েছে, তাহলে গিনিপিকের উপরে যে ওষুধটা দেওয়া হয়েছে সেটা কতটা এফেক্টিভ এটা বোঝা যায় ডিপেন্ডেন্ট গিনিপিকটাকে অবজার্ভ করে। তাহলে ওষুধ দেওয়াটা হচ্ছে ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্ট, তার ইম্প্যাক্টটাকে অবজার্ভ করা যে ডিপেন্ডেন্ট। The study is carried out under controlled conditions. Thus, there is not much interference of extraneous variables. That means the study is carried out under controlled conditions. Within the controlled setup, researcher control the variables. There is no such interference present to manipulate, to figure out the sections. And rest, and the 4 points is it has high internal validity. There's a two types of validity in our research: internal validity and the external validity. Internal validity, that means you need to focus on the statistical orientations, cause effect relationships, uh, uh, more authentic hypothesis build up. So it always focusing on the internal validity, not the external, because internal validity is more focusing on the quantitative method and quantitative tools, and external validity focusing on more qualitative orientation or qualitative tools. Here are the limitations of experimental research. Artificial settings may limit external validity. If you stop the behavior of the individuals within a particular social setup and observing it, you cannot measure the emotions, you cannot figure out the essence of the human's mentality. So within the stop, or within the specific orientations, within a specific setup, it would be very difficult to figure out external validity of the individuals or the facts. Ethical constraints in certain areas of study, more focusing on ethical orientations, ethical constraint. It's not flexible, not focusing on emotions, not focusing on open-ended questions, time and resource intensive. If we paid attention on the longitudinal study are more focusing on time driven. Longitudinal study take more time to provide you the detailed observations, detailed report. And last is potential for experimental bias. The results and experimentations are more focusing on experimentation biases. You are not supposed to take yourself to figure out, to pay attention on the individual orientation, subjective orientations. Always you focusing on researcher, focusing on the experimentations, and through the experimentations they want to get the results. Without the experimentation they cannot figure out the results. So they are more prone to experiment oriented. Here are some important applications of quantitative research. In this specific sections, I have mentioned the applications of quantitative, where quantitative research applications find out. First, in economics. Most of the economical studies are focusing on the quantitative research orientations. They have paid attention on the money and their impact on the human beings, society, social development, growth, and in all the sections they have used quantitative method and different quantitative tools to measure. They have used statistical tools to measure the data. They have used SPSS so that they can figure out the results. So in the economical field, in the economics, quantitative research are more prone to use, and it is helpful to provide us a detailed study regarding our society. Next one is sociology and psychology. In the sociological study and psychological study, quantitative research are used rapidly, and it is increasing. In most of the cases, when researcher figure out the quantitative data, such as the relationship between the economic upliftment as well as with the poverty, they have sorry they used researcher used quantitative research. In the medical research is definitely used, is an essential method in medical research. I have already mentioned 2 or 3 examples that how medical scientists they paid attention on the different laboratory based experiment within the proper setup. with a proper environmental setup through they have got the information. So medical research এর ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু বরাবরই এর প্রয়োগ পরিলক্ষিত হয়, and as well as the market research. মার্কেট রিসার্চের ক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু ভ্যালু ওরিয়েন্টেশনস বোঝার জন্য প্রোডাক্টের প্রাইস রেট, the price orientations, the people's parameters, people choices, this art can get through the market research. They are using different tools and scales through collected data, and they analyze the data and to figure out the market trend of the people. Here are another important topic. There's the field experiment. The field experiments are conducted in natural settings within the environment of the participants, for example, classroom. The experimenter can manipulate independent variables through control may not be high. তো দেখো field এক্সপেরিমেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে বলা হচ্ছে যে within a proper setup, within a proper environmental orientation, participant can experiment the variables and their views, and they have also manipulated the independent variables, and to figure out its importance, it changes on dependent variables. So field experiments somehow focusing on the proper setup oriented field as well as the importance and executions. When we're talking about the characteristics of field experiments, there are the 4 essential characteristics. The researcher can manipulate the independent variables. I have already told that researchers manipulate the independent variables and figure out the result, the impact on the dependent variables. Second, control is not high as the experiments is carried out in a natural settings. In the experimental research, a researcher cannot figure out, researcher cannot provide rigorous control. They have provide fixes control. Within the proper natural settings, they have controlled the behavior and to figure out the results. So controlled and proper natural settings are present in the field of experiments. Third important issues are called that external validity is higher compared to experimental research. Experimental research are more focusing on internal validity. Apart from the internal validity, there has an external validity, because external validity focusing on the qualitative methods of orientations. They have focusing on the method of phenomenology, ethnomethodology, interpretivism, hermeneutic. These are the methods of external validity. Through this method of external validity, we can get more detailed information regarding individuals and other aspects of human beings. External validity focusing on the detailed informations regarding the humans and their natural setups. And the fourth essential point is the randomizations is not possible. Random state of orientations cannot be possible. Researcher always focusing on the generalized form of resources. They have planned properly, they have figured out the variables, they have prepared a specific environmental setup, and they have manipulated the independent variables to execute the result. So in the quantitative research, in the experimental research, in the field experiments, all the factors are focusing on internal validity. They have paid attention on a specific environmental setup. They have focuses on statistical analysis. They paid attention on numerical data, as well as they have manipulate the independent variables and to figure out the impact and issues on the dependent variables. So when we comparing it, quantitative research to qualitative research, quantitative research is more focusing on quantity, numerical understanding and statistical orientations, and the qualitative research focusing on the qualities such as values, emotions, traditions and rest of the other emotional attachment of the humans. So in our society, in our sociological field of orientation, both the methods are essential. In some cases we have noticed that we have used mixed method to figure out the result. So for the convenience of the research, for the convenience of the result, researcher using the method as per their convenience, and they used proper technique to figure out the data and analyzing it, as well as they can get proper results from themselves. Thank you.